Two priests decided to take a vacation in Goa. Determined to blend in and enjoy their time as regular tourists, they ditched their clerical attire and hit the shops, picking out the most outrageous Hawaiian shirts, loud shorts, flashy sunglasses, and sandals they could find. The next morning, dressed in their new beach wear, they settled into lounge chairs, sipping drinks and soaking up the sun. Just then, a stunning blonde in a bikini strolled past them. As she walked by, she smiled and said, "Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father." The priests sat there stunned. How on earth did she know they were priests? Determined to crack the mystery, they went back to the store that evening and bought even wilder outfits, shirts so bright they could be seen from space. The next day, they strutted onto the beach, confident they were unrecognizable. Yet, just as they were getting comfortable, the same gorgeous blonde walked by again, this time in a different bikini. Once more, she flashed a smile and greeted them. "Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father." One priest couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up and said, "Young lady, we are indeed priests, and proud of it. But how in the world do you recognize us, even in these outfits?" She chuckled and said, "Father, it's me, Sister Philomena." A newly married Liam goes to meet Father Charles. After greeting the priest, he says, "Father, I need to talk to you." The priest nods and asks, "Is it a confession, my son?" Liam shakes his head. "No, Father. I just need some clarity on something." Father Charles leads him to his private chamber and says, "Go on, Liam. What's on your mind?" Liam sighs. "Father, why do so many women try to change their husbands after marriage? My friends keep teasing me about it." The priest chuckles knowingly and says, "Ah, my son, let me explain. When a bride walks down the aisle, she focuses on three things: the aisle, the altar, and the hymn being sung. Aisle, altar, hymn, altar, hymn, altar, hymn. And by the time she reaches the groom, the words have already settled in her mind. I'll alter him." On a particularly windy day, a rabbi was walking down the street when a sudden gust blew his hat right off his head. He ran after it, but the wind was relentless, sending the hat tumbling farther and farther away. A young non-Jewish man, seeing the rabbi's struggle, sprinted after the hat, caught it, and returned it to him. Grateful, the rabbi handed the young man $20 and blessed him. Feeling lucky, the young man decided to head to the racetrack. "With the rabbi's blessing, I can't lose," he thought. When he arrived, he checked the race program and saw a horse named Top Hat running in the fifth race, at 100 to 1 odds. Taking it as a sign, he put his entire $20 on Top Hat, and unbelievably, the horse won. Flushed with excitement, he scanned the next race and spotted a horse named Bowler at 30 to 1. Thinking it was another lucky hat-related sign, he bet all his winnings on Bowler, and sure enough, he won again. That night, he excitedly recounted his amazing day to his father. "So, did you bring home the money?" his father asked. "Well, no," the son admitted. "For the last race, I saw a horse named Chateau. It was the heavy favorite, and since Chateau means hat in French, I figured it was a guaranteed win, so I bet everything on it," the father groaned. "You fool. Hat in French is chapeau, no chateau." Shaking his head, he sighed and asked, "So who did win the race?" The son shrugged. "Some long shot, a Spanish horse named Sombrero." Sarah's parents were thrilled. Tonight they would finally meet their 28-year-old daughter's boyfriend. Since she had never introduced them to anyone before, they knew this must be serious. Her mother spent the whole day cooking a feast, while her father cleaned the house and mowed the lawn. They both dressed in their finest clothes, eager to make a good impression. At exactly 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. They rushed to open it, their excitement turning to shock. Sarah stood there smiling, next to a massive man covered in tattoos. His face was a battlefield of scars, as if he had fought in every street brawl imaginable. He had the kind of look that made people cross the street at night. After a tense exchange of pleasantries, Sarah's parents quickly pulled her into the kitchen. "Sarah, what the heck?" her mother whispered urgently. "Why are you dating this guy? He looks like a thug." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Mom, you've got it all wrong. He's an incredibly kind and charitable man." Her father raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Oh, yeah? And what exactly makes you say that?" Sarah beamed. Well, just this month. He spent 200 hours serving his community. Her mother blinked. Really? Sarah nodded. Yep, court-ordered community service. An elderly man accidentally rear-ends a young guy's expensive sports car. Furious, the young man jumps out and storms over. Look what you did to my car, he shouts. You're going to give me $10,000 right now or I'll beat you to a pulp. The old man trembles. Oh my, I don't have that kind of money, but let me call my son. He trains dolphins. He'll know what to do. Dolphins? The young man scoffs, rolling his eyes. The old man pulls out his phone, dials his son, and just as his son answers, the furious driver snatches the phone away. So, you're a dolphin trainer, huh? Well, your old man just wrecked my car, and I need 10 grand now, or I'm beating both of you to a pulp. Better train those dolphins to fetch you some cash. A calm voice replies, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, a pickup truck screeches to a halt. A massive man steps out and strolls toward the bully. Before the young man can react, the newcomer smashes his forehead into the guy's skull, dropping him like a sack of bricks. He catches him, lowers him gently to the ground, then turns to the old man. For the last time, Dad, I train SEALs, Navy SEALs, not dolphins. A woman starts dating a doctor, and before long, she becomes pregnant. Unsure of what to do, they scramble for a solution. Around the same time, a priest is admitted to the hospital for a prostate operation. The doctor suddenly has an idea. I know what we'll do, he tells the woman. After I operate on the priest, I'll tell him he miraculously gave birth. He'll never question it. Do you really think that'll work? She asks. It's worth a shot. So the doctor delivers the baby, then performs the priest's surgery. When the priest wakes up, the doctor rushes in looking astonished. Father, you're not going to believe this. What? What happened? The priest asks. You gave birth to a baby. That's impossible. I just did the surgery myself, the doctor insists. It's a miracle. Here's your child. Years pass, and the priest raises the boy as his own. But by the time the boy turns 15, the priest knows he must finally tell him the truth. One day he sits him down and says solemnly, Son, there's something I need to tell you. I'm not your father. The boy looks confused. What do you mean you're not my father? The priest sighs. I'm your mother. The archbishop is your father. Jennifer's wedding day was fast approaching, and nothing could dampen her excitement. Not even her parents' bitter divorce. Her mother had found the perfect dress to wear and was certain she'd be the most elegant mother of the bride ever. But just a week later, Jennifer was horrified to learn that her father's much younger new wife had bought the exact same dress. Jennifer pleaded with her stepmother to exchange it, but the younger woman smirked and said, Absolutely not. I look like $1 million in this dress and I'm wearing it. Heartbroken, Jennifer turned to her mother, who simply smiled and said, Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll get another dress. After all, it's your special day. A few days later, they found another stunning gown, and after their shopping trip, they stopped for lunch. Mom, Jennifer asked, aren't you going to return the first dress? I mean, when would you ever wear it? Her mother took a sip of her tea, smiled, and said, Oh, I have the perfect occasion. I'm wearing it to the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding. A husband and wife were celebrating 50 wonderful years together. Their 3 children, now highly successful, agreed to a special Sunday dinner in their honor. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad, gushed their eldest son, a surgeon. Sorry I'm late. Had an emergency at the hospital and didn't have time to get you a gift. Not to worry, said the father. The important thing is that we're all together. A few minutes later, their second son, a lawyer, arrived. Mom, Dad, you both look great. I just flew in from Los Angeles between depositions and didn't have time to shop for a gift. It's okay, the father said. We're just glad you made it. Finally, their daughter, a marketing executive, walked in. Hi, happy anniversary. I'm so sorry. I've been swamped with work, and my boss is sending me out of town. I didn't have time to buy you anything. After dessert, the father leaned back, smiled, and said, There's something your mother and I have wanted to tell you for a long time. You see, we were very poor when we were younger. Even so, we worked hard to send each of you to college. Through it all, your mother and I knew we loved each other deeply, but we just never found the time to get married. The room fell silent. The three children gasped. "Wait, you mean we're bastards?" one of them blurted out. The father took a sip of his coffee, sighed, and said, "Yep, and cheap ones too." Three sons left home, made their fortunes, and later discussed the lavish gifts they had given their elderly mother. The first said, "I built Mom a huge mansion." The second said, "I sent her a brand new Mercedes with a personal chauffeur." The third smiled and said, "You know how much Mom loves reading the Bible, but her eyesight isn't what it used to be, so I got her a truly remarkable parrot. It took church elders 12 years to train him. He can recite the entire Bible. All Mom has to do is say the chapter and verse, and the parrot recites it perfectly." A few weeks later, their mother sent out her thank you letters. "William," she wrote, "the house you built is enormous, but I only live in one room, and I'm stuck cleaning the whole thing." "Arnold," she wrote next, "I appreciate the car, but I'm too old to go anywhere. And that chauffeur, rude as can be, he's such a pain." Finally, she wrote to her youngest son, "David, my dear, you were the only one who truly understood what I needed. That chicken was absolutely delicious." One Sunday, while counting the weekly offering, the pastor of a small church found a pink envelope containing $1,000. The same thing happened the next week, and the week after that. Curious, the pastor kept an eye on the collection and soon spotted an elderly woman placing the familiar pink envelope in the plate. Finally, unable to contain his curiosity, he approached her. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice your generous donations. Every week you put $1,000 in the collection plate." "Why, yes, Pastor," she replied with a smile. "My son sends me money each week and I always give some to the church." "That's wonderful," the pastor said. "But $1,000 is a lot. Are you sure you can afford it? How much does he send you?" "Oh, $10,000 a week," she said casually. The pastor was stunned. "Your son must be very successful. What does he do?" "He's a veterinarian," she replied. The pastor nodded. "That's an honorable profession. But I had no idea vets made that kind of money. Where does he practice?" With a proud smile, she said, "In Nevada. He owns 2 cat houses, one in Las Vegas and one in Reno." At school, little Johnny's friend tells him most adults have at least one deep, dark secret. Just say, "I know the whole truth," and they'll do anything to keep quiet. Excited to test this out, Johnny heads home. As soon as he walks in, he looks his mom straight in the eye and says, "I know the whole truth." Her face goes pale. She hurriedly pulls $20 from her purse and whispers, "Just don't tell your father." Johnny is thrilled. When his dad gets home, he tries again. "I know the whole truth." His dad's eyes widen. After a tense moment, he sighs, digs into his wallet, and hands Johnny $40. "Please, don't tell your mother." Now Johnny is over the moon. The next morning, on his way to school, he spots the mailman at the front door. With a confident grin, he walks up and says, "I know the whole truth." The mailman freezes. His eyes fill with tears. Then, arms outstretched, he chokes up and says, "Son, come give your daddy a big hug." After a long night of buying drinks for a stunning woman, Joe finally scored and offered to drive her home. When they reached her place, she invited him in for a nightcap. One thing led to another, and before he knew it, Joe was in bed, naked, and enjoying the night of his life. Afterward, as he lay there catching his breath, he reached for his jeans, pulled out a cigarette, and started searching for his lighter. "Do you have a light?" he asked. "There might be some matches in the top drawer," she murmured, still curled up next to him. Joe reached over, opened the drawer, and found a box of matches, sitting neatly on top of a framed picture of another man. His stomach dropped. Was this her husband? A boyfriend? Was he about to be in real danger? Trying to stay calm, he held up the photo and asked, who's this?" She smiled, nuzzling against him. "Oh, don't worry, silly. That's just me before the operation." A traveler stopped by a small village in the countryside. While having a drink at the local bar, someone asked if he was married. "I'm divorced," he sighed. "Never found a woman I didn't end up arguing with all the time." A local chuckled and said, "Then you should visit the old couple that lives on the hill. They've been married over 60 years, and rumor has it, they've never had a single fight." The traveler scoffed. "That's impossible. Every couple argues." But the locals swore it was true. So the next morning, the traveler knocked on the couple's door. The old man welcomed him in for tea, and after hearing why he came, he simply smiled and nodded. "It's true. We've never fought." The traveler leaned in, desperate. "Please, tell me your secret." The old man took a sip of his tea and said, "Well, it all started on our honeymoon. We were riding our mule back to town when it tripped over a stone. My wife calmly said, 'That's one.' A little while later, the mule tripped again. She said, 'That's two.' 2 minutes later, it tripped a third time. Without a word, she pulled out a gun and shot it in the head. I was horrified. 'What the hell is wrong with you? That was our only mule!' I shouted. She turned to me, looked me dead in the eye, and said, 'That's one.' And we haven't had a fight since." Two lifelong friends grow up together, but after college, one moves to New York and the other to Washington. They agree to meet every 10 years in Florida to play golf and catch up. At age 32, they finish their round and head to lunch. "Where do you want to go?" "Hooters." "Why Hooters?" "They've got those servers with the big boobs, tight shorts, and gorgeous legs. Good enough for me." At 42, they meet again. "Where to for lunch?" "Hooters." Again, why? "Cold beer, big screens, and plenty of action on the games." Fair point. At 52, after another round of golf, where this time? Hooters. Seriously, why? Food's pretty good and there's plenty of parking. Can't argue with that. At 62, another decade, another game. Lunch, Hooters. Why? Wings are half price and the food isn't too spicy. Great choice. At 72, the routine continues. Where we eating? Hooters. Why? They've got senior discounts and 6 handicap spaces right by the door. Perfect. At 82, they meet for what might be their last round of golf. Where should we go for lunch? Hooters. Why? Because we've never been there before. Sounds interesting. Let's give it a try. A woman visited the doctor looking utterly exhausted. She sighed and said, "Doctor, I feel so tired all the time." The doctor asked, "How often do you have sex?" She replied, "Every single day without fail." The doctor suggested, "Why don't you take a break on Sundays?" The woman looked shocked and whispered, "But doctor, my husband is home on Sundays. How can I say no to him?" Gas station last night, my wife demanded that I take her somewhere expensive. So, I took her to a gas station, and that's when the fight started. Social Security office. After retiring, I went to the Social Security office to apply. The woman behind the counter asked for my ID, but I had left my wallet at home. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'll have to come back later." She looked me over and said, "Unbutton your shirt." I hesitated, but did as she asked, revealing my curly silver chest hair. "That's proof enough," she said, processing my application. Excited, I told my wife about my experience. She smirked and said, "You should have dropped your pants. You might have gotten disability too." And that's when the fight started. High school reunion. At my high school reunion, I kept staring at a woman drinking alone at the bar. My wife nudged me and asked, "Do you know her?" "Yeah," I sighed. "That's my old girlfriend. I heard she started drinking right after we broke up and hasn't been sober since." My wife took a sip of her wine and said, "Wow, who knew someone could celebrate for that long?" And that's when the fight started. Restaurant, I took my wife to a restaurant. The waiter took my order first. "I'll have the strip steak, medium rare, please." He nodded. "Aren't you worried about the mad cow?" "Nah, she can order for herself." And that's when the fight started. Mirror. My wife was standing in front of the bedroom mirror, sighing. "I look old, fat, and ugly. I need you to give me a compliment." I thought for a second and said, "Well, your eyesight is perfect." And that's when the fight started. Beer versus cold cream. I tried to talk my wife into buying a case of beer for $14.95. Instead, she bought a jar of cold cream for $7.95. I told her the beer would make you look better at night than the cold cream. And that's when the fight started. Dress question. My wife asked me, "Does this dress make my butt look big?" I said, "Not as much as the one you wore yesterday." And that's when the fight started. 3 a.m. incident at 3 a.m. a loud noise woke my wife. She jumped out of bed and screamed, "Holy crap! That must be my husband." Without thinking, I leaped out of bed, tripped over my pants, crashed through the window, tumbled onto the lawn, and sprinted to my car. A few minutes later, I came back inside, furious. "I am your husband!" She glared at me and said. "Then why were you running?" And that's when the fight started. Fishing trip Saturday morning, I got up early, dressed quietly, packed my lunch, grabbed the dog, and slipped into the garage to hook up the boat. Just as I backed out, a torrential downpour started. The wind was howling at 50 miles per hour. I checked the forecast. Storm all day. Defeated, I went back inside, undressed, and slipped back into bed, snuggling up to my wife. "The weather's awful out there," I whispered. Without missing a beat, she murmured, "Can you believe my idiot husband is out fishing in this?" And that's when the fight started. Anniversary. I asked my wife, "Where do you want to go for our anniversary?" Her face softened. "Somewhere I haven't been in a long time," she said sweetly. So I suggested, "How about the kitchen?" And that's when the fight started. Who wants to be a millionaire? My wife and I were watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in bed. I turned to her and asked, "Do you want to have sex?" "No," she said. I smirked. "Is that your final answer?" Without looking away from the TV, she said, "Yes." So I said, "Then I'd like to phone a friend." And that's when the fight started. A large corporation hires a tribe of former cannibals. During orientation, the CEO tells them, "You have full rights as employees, but under no circumstances are you allowed to eat anyone." The cannibals agree, and for weeks, everything goes smoothly. Then one day, the CEO calls them into his office. "Look, this is awkward, but one of our employees has gone missing. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The tribal chief looks around, then shakes his head. "No, sir, we gave up that lifestyle. We haven't eaten anyone." The CEO remains skeptical, but lacking evidence sends them back to work. As soon as they're alone, the chief turns to his people and growls, "All right, which one of you idiots did it?" One tribesman sheepishly raises his hand. "I ate the cleaning lady," the chief smacks him upside the head. "You fool! We've been eating department heads, marketing executives, and efficiency consultants for weeks, and nobody noticed, but you had to go and eat someone they actually need." Benson runs a nail factory and decides it's time to advertise. He calls up his friend, a marketing expert, and asks for a TV ad. "Give me a week," says the friend. "I'll come up with something brilliant." A week later, the marketer returns, excited. He opens his laptop and presses play. The ad shows a Roman soldier hammering nails into Jesus on the cross. The soldier turns to the camera, grins, and says, "Benson's nails. They'll hold anything." Benson leaps out of his chair. "Are you insane? They'll never air that. No more crucifixion. Just come up with something else." "Got it," says the marketer. "Give me another week." 7 days later, he returns with a new ad. This time, the camera zooms out from a Roman soldier standing proudly, arms folded, looking up at Jesus on the cross. The soldier nods approvingly and says, "Benson's nails, guaranteed to hold." Benson turns red. "What is wrong with you? No Jesus, no crosses. One last chance or you're fired." A week later, the marketer returns, looking smug. He plays the final version. The ad shows a man with long hair and a beard, completely naked, sprinting across a field, gasping for breath. Behind him, a dozen furious Roman soldiers chase him. One soldier stops, turns to the camera, and sighs. "If only we had used Benson's nails." A TV crew visits a 100-year-old man who lives alone in a cabin deep in the woods. When they arrive, they find him chopping wood with ease, his body strong and fit, more like a man in his 40s than a centenarian. Impressed, they ask, "What's your secret to such a long and active life?" The old man smiles and says, "Well, let me tell you a story. 70 years ago, a blizzard hit out of nowhere. It had been a mild winter, just light snowfall, when suddenly the wind howled and the snow fell so thick you couldn't see 20 feet ahead. I stepped outside to call my dog when I noticed a weak light flickering in the distance. Someone was out there, lost in the storm. I kept calling for my dog, knowing the person might hear me. Sure enough, the light grew closer until I saw a man shivering and exhausted, barely standing. I grabbed him and rushed him inside, fighting against the wind to shut the door. He was in shock, but unhurt. I helped him off with his boots and coat, then sat him by the fire. To warm up, we each had a glass of whiskey and a bowl of stew I'd been cooking. Once he stopped shaking, he thanked me over and over, saying he thought he was a dead man until he heard my voice. After eating, we realized there was only one bed, but no problem. We figured it would be warmer if we shared. Well, one thing led to another, and we started touching, then kissing, and, well, we made love. In the morning, the storm had passed. Over breakfast, he put on his coat, gathered his things, and said he had to go. His wife and 3 kids would be worried sick. Before leaving, he gave me the most tender kiss on the cheek and walked away. I watched him go and realized I never even asked his name. The TV crew stares in stunned silence. After a long pause, one of them clears his throat and says, we meant, what's your secret for long life? Oh, that, the old man says. Clean air, regular exercise, healthy food, no stress, you know that kind of stuff. One dark night in Dublin, a fire broke out at the local chemical plant. In seconds, flames engulfed the building and the alarm rang across all nearby fire stations. Firefighters rushed to the scene, but the blaze was too intense to approach. The chemical company president ran up to the fire chief, shouting, "All our secret formulas are locked in the vault at the center of the plant. They must be saved. I'll give £50,000 to the fire department that brings them out intact." But the fire raged on, forcing the crews to stay back. As the situation became desperate, more fire stations arrived. The president, sweating nervously, raised the reward, £100,000 to whoever can get the formulas. Still, no one could break through the inferno. Then, from the distance, a lone siren wailed. Out of the darkness came a small, rusted fire truck, belonging to a rural volunteer brigade made up mostly of men over 65. To everyone's shock, the old truck didn't stop. It roared past the state-of-the-art engines parked at a safe distance, straight into the heart of the flames. The onlookers gasped. Inside the inferno, the elderly firefighters leaped out and fought the fire from within. It was a breathtaking display. Against all odds, they pushed back the flames and saved the secret vault. When the smoke cleared, the astonished company president announced, "For such an incredible act of bravery, I'm raising the reward to £200,000. The local TV crew rushed over to interview the fire chief, a 70-year-old man named Paddy. "Sir, that was unbelievable. What are you going to do with all that money?" Paddy wiped his soot-covered face and said, "Well, the first thing we're going to do is fix the brakes on that bloody fire truck." A husband was hopelessly addicted to smoking and drinking. One day his wife had enough. "If you don't stop smoking," she warned, "your intestines will fall out." He just laughed and kept puffing away. Determined to prove her point, his wife got up early the next morning, bought some large intestines from the butcher, and carefully stuffed them into his underwear while he was still asleep. An hour later, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. Then, silence. 30 minutes passed. Then another 30. Finally, the husband came downstairs, pale and drenched in sweat. His wife smirked. "What's wrong, dear?" "You were right," he gasped. "My intestines fell out." He wiped his forehead. "But don't worry. I managed to push them all back in." An elderly lady walked into the bar on a cruise ship and ordered a scotch. "With just 2 drops of water, please." The bartender handed her the drink and she smiled. "I'm celebrating my 80th birthday today." "Well, in that case," the bartender said, "this one's on me." As she finished her drink, a woman sitting to her right chimed in. "I'd love to buy you a drink, too." "How sweet of you," the lady said. "Bartender, I'll have another scotch, just 2 drops of water." "Coming right up," the bartender said. A few minutes later, a man on her left joined in. "I'd like to buy you a drink as well." "Why, thank you, dear," she beamed. "Bartender, another scotch, 2 drops of water." The bartender obliged, but couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. "Ma'am, I've got to ask, why the scotch with just 2 drops of water?" The old woman chuckled. Sonny, at my age, I know how to handle my liquor. Water, on the other hand, that's another story.